as of today, most of the patients are not looking at cannabis as something to get high from. They're looking at cannabis as a medicine to get their pain, to get relief from their pain.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley, in partnership with Lomitech, and sponsored by Homeward Ventures, Hippo Insurance, Upwest, Hillel at Stanford, Leap, and Birthright Excel. Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into the Israeli cannabis market. Meet Omer Zerahia, cannabis and tech entrepreneur. With 15 years of cross-sector experience in founding, managing, and directing private and public companies in the tech and cannabis industries, Omer has been leading M&A processes, global strategic partnerships, and deal-making worldwide. Omer has also been teaching as a senior lecturer in various academic institutes, both for computer science and for behavioral sciences with a specialization in cannabis. Omer Zerahia, welcome to 20-Minute Leaders.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
Happy to be here. Pretty good.
You ready to talk about cannabis?
Yeah, let's go.
But you don't consume cannabis.
I do not. No.
But you're one of the leading figures in the Israeli ecosystem for cannabis. How does that work?
So in Israel, basically cannabis is, as of today, is for medical purposes, pharmaceutical purposes. That's the people that we're serving are the patients in Israel. And fortunately, I am not one of them. I'm pretty healthy, so I don't need to consume cannabis in order to make my health better. For other reasons, such as the recreational sphere, the recreational world, I'm a total believer that it gives joy to many people. I'm not there. And I believe that the Israeli market, as we see it today, is going to move forward and make recreational cannabis legal in the next couple of months, years from now. So I'm a huge believer in cannabis when it comes to the medical sphere. And there, again, fortunately, I have the privilege to serve and to provide cannabis to those patients that it gives a lot of relief and help to their pains, both physically and emotionally.
Now, if I were to do this podcast even 5 or 7 years ago, it probably would have been really difficult for me to have somebody talking about cannabis on a social media platform. What happened in this last 3, 4, 5 years that really changed the way and allows me to also feel very comfortable talking to an expert in cannabis on my social media?
So a lot happened. Like if we look at the Israeli market, but also the global market, 5 years ago, Israel had only 8 players in the game, 8 cultivators that grew cannabis and provided it to patients. Not in the manner we know today. If we look globally, so we had states in the US that provided it, we had Canada that provided it, but it wasn't the boom that we experiencing today. I think that several verticals have worked their way up. They were the regulation first that came to realize that cannabis is a pharmaceutical product. And when I say the regulation, not everywhere. Still today, just take the US. The FDA does not approve cannabis. Even if you have 30-something states in the US that approve cannabis, the FDA, the federal government, is not approving it yet. So although we had a huge leap of faith and also the regulations in Israel, in Canada, in Germany, lately in France and other countries, we haven't we haven't saw it on every country in the Western world.
But what do we learn from seeing different regulatory organizations, allowing cannabis to be used either for recreational use or better for medical use? What happened, to society? What can we see already as sort of a trend looking forward?
So first of all, we need to understand that cannabis is here before us. Cannabis is one of the ancient crops in the world that we know of. It suffered in the 20th century from a bad reputation that brought it to be something that is illegal, like 100 years ago, or not 100, but 80 years ago, Hollywood were against cannabis. Okay, Nixon was against cannabis and his government. But as of today, we see that cannabis got to the pharmacies through the door, and today it's being prescribed. And Israel is a very good example for that. We're seeing something very interesting that cannabis, for my opinion, is the first to come. Meaning we see a botanical substance, something we grow, that the Western world for years took it very hard to understand that it has a lot of benefits that we cannot really understand what's behind them. Meaning cannabis has hundreds of active materials. As of today in Israel and in Europe, when we look at cannabis, we look at THC, we look at CBD, sometimes at CBN, and maybe two other cannabinoids. But we have hundreds more. The FDA, the Western medicine, doesn't know how to work with hundreds of molecules. It knows how to work with a single molecule. And then you do the test, the clinical test, you prove that it's safe, you prove that you can understand exactly who can consume it, how, when, etc. And then they approve it. Cannabis is not the same. The reason cannabis got into the pharmacies is not because of the clinical data. You need to understand, cannabis is, in that sense, one of a kind. Last time, and don't get me on that, but I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure it's true. Last time that a drug got into pharmacies without clinical evidence was something like 110 years ago.
Wow.
So cannabis did that without any clinical tests. Why? Because the population decided, because it was good for them, because some of the countries such as Israel, such as Denmark, decided to do a pilot period, saying, okay, let's do a pilot period of 2 years, for example. Let's provide specific patients with cannabis. Let's provide specific companies with the license to cultivate cannabis, and let's see how it works.
Right.
There's something ancient about cannabis that suddenly some of the Western countries decided to embrace and say, okay, if it worked for hundreds of years, thousands of years, and it was okay, let's start examining that. Not in the clinical FDA path, but in a different path. And when I'm looking at the future, I hope, as I mentioned before, that cannabis is the first one to come. And I hope and believe that the other botanical substances will be here to follow, and that the regulation that is experiencing a very, I believe, good experience with cannabis will do the same with other substances.
Right. And so if you're looking today at the Israeli ecosystem and you're looking at your part in it, as an entrepreneur in this ecosystem, what is that even like? So right now we're seeing different startups emerge in the cannabis world and leveraging technology to go and either optimize the growing or better transparency. What is it like entering as an entrepreneur into the cannabis world? And tell me a little bit about your own journey there.
So it's very interesting, as always. So I began my journey in the cannabis world when it was the old regulation.
Yeah.
The old regulation was 8 players that basically cultivated, manufactured, and provided patients with cannabis in a direct kind of way. You had only 2 anchors. You had the cultivator and you had the patient. And that was the connection. You did everything as a cultivator. Nowadays, since the new regulation got into place, this value chain was divided into 5 links. You have the breeder, the breeding facility, you have the cultivation facility, you have the manufacturing facility, you have the distribution facility, and you have the pharmacy. And those 5 links are connected in order to provide the patient with a pharmaceutical product. So that's the story behind the regulation in like 20 seconds. For me as an entrepreneur, I got in from the financial aspect. I have a very good and long time connection with one of Israel's 8 first cannabis companies, Candoc, and I got in back in the end of 2016, and that led me to a process that took almost 2 years of taking Candoc public. and basically becoming the first Israeli cannabis LP to be public on the Israeli Stock Exchange. Cannabis is now did the SPAC as well, and is about to become public on NASDAQ as well, taking a company that was the smallest cannabis company in the industry, to be, as of today, one of the biggest. I believe it's the largest, the leading cannabis company in Israel. So it was a hell of a journey doing that. And again, I came not from the ideal world of cannabis as the savior of this world, but as a problem fixer that saw a lot of potential in the company and in the market. And again, fortunately, probably the word that I'm saying the most, fortunately, I had the privilege to succeed with it.
And so if we're looking now at the cannabis world of where it is today, and looking a little bit into the future, what are we observing? What trends, how is it going to affect us as consumers, either medically or recreationally, economically, but also just in terms of regulations and how people perceive cannabis and how it's going to be integrated into our daily lives?
So first of all, it's, as of today, and I believe it's going to be the same for the next few years, it's a matter of geography. First of all, it depends where you live. Mm-hmm. If it's the US, if it's Canada, if it's Germany, if it's Israel, and every geography has its own rules. Mm-hmm. As we see it today, and again, I'm taking the Israeli market as a point of view. As we see it today, we see, first of all, an increase of the usage from the patient side. The age of our patients using cannabis is getting higher. Mm-hmm. The reason is that today cannabis has a better reputation than it had before. And if before the average age was, for example, 40, we see it today more closer to 50.
Okay.
So that's very interesting.
Which it's a big say, because you're saying that the older generations that are coming in with these preconceived notions of what cannabis is, that is showing a dramatic shift in our understanding of society.
Exactly. As of today, most of the patients are not looking at cannabis as something to get high from. They're looking at cannabis as a medicine to get their pain, to get relief from their pain. So that's one. It's very interesting to see that. The second thing we see is the element of money getting into the industry. Because of all the companies that got in and all the money that got in, a lot from the public sphere, we see a lot of money going into new products, going into new strains, going into new researches. And because of that, we see a bigger variety of products, a bigger variety of strains. And if I'm taking a leap forward of, like, let's say 5 years, I believe we'll see also a lot more technologies in it. And when I say technologies, I mean even in the product itself. Like the two major elements that we see in cannabis, one is the way we consume it. As of today, still 70% of the global market are using cannabis for joints. That's not the most medicinal kind of way to use it.
Right.
So we see a lot of products that are being developed today that are being developed in order to provide doctors with the possibility to tell their patients, listen, take it as you take any other medicine, whether it's a gel capsule, whether it's a patch or a spray. So we see that. The second element is an element called bioavailability. One of the things we see with cannabis is that once you consume it, you don't consume 100% of what you're getting into your body. Mm-hmm. A lot of elements, once you put it sublingual or once you swallow it, are basically are disappearing because of your body. So we believe that through technology, we can sort of coat the product you're taking in order for your body to take more out of this product. So those two verticals are technology verticals.
Right.
And we see more and more companies getting into those verticals. So that's very interesting.
Now, what is the barrier for young entrepreneurs to come and say, listen, there's this great market here. There's a lot of innovation to be done. We can leverage our skills either in biology or maybe in computational biology or AI to help work in this market. Is there still this psychological barrier of I don't want to be known as a cannabis entrepreneur? Is there still a barrier of some sort?
So I think that in our generation and younger generation, the barrier has passed. But I do think that there is a gap of knowledge. 2 years ago, my brother and I, Roy, that is my partner, both in Kandok, he was Kandok CEO, and today we're heading a new company. We open up a degree, a BA degree in the Israeli Valley College in Israel. And this degree basically is trying to take a lot of elements from the cannabis world and provide it to students, because we recognize that there is a very big gap between what we know as a part of the industry and what the world knows, even if he wants to know. So this BA allows students to get into the cannabis industry from the academia side, and that's super, super important. I believe today that if you're trying to get into the cannabis world and you want to open up a new business, first of all, you need to study, whether it's the BA, whether it's from the internet, meeting people from the industry, understanding what are the gaps. Every year, every quarter, every 5 years, whatever, this is a very hectic industry. So you need every point of time to understand what is lacking or where is the potential. For example, in 2018, when we took Kandok public, the main gap was cultivation. I won't say that's the main gap today. It's a different one. So recognize the gap and get into it, but only after you have the knowledge to what's the regulation about it, what are the target audience in your case, what is existing in this sphere in the world, in Canada, in the US, in Europe, etc. And once you have that in line, I believe that there is a lot to do, because cannabis is a very old product, but a very new industry, like legal industry. The potential is huge, both on the product side and the geographical side. So once you understand that, you have a lot of room to act.
I love it. Omer, thank you so much. I have a few more questions before I let you go, but they're about Omer and not about cannabis. And I want to take you back to your childhood. What really fascinated you as a kid, as you were going around the world? What was going through your mind?
I think cables and computers and everything that was connected into technology that I could break apart. Put cables in, put cables out, understanding what moves different elements in it. I think that was,
amazing.
As a geek kid, was the most thrilling thing.
And today, what inspires you?
People. Definitely people. I know it's a cliche, but definitely people. Knowing new people, listening to their stories, taking out from their stories the thing that suits me. People everywhere.
Amazing. And what are 3 words, or 2 or 4, that you would use to describe yourself?
Myself?
Yourself.
Well, in Hebrew we have a saying, "En anachto me'id al isato," so translated later. It's hard to describe myself, but I would say, hopefully I would say, curiosity, kindness, and something I'm working on lately a lot, patience.
Omer, toda rabba.
Thank you.
It was amazing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.